So, welcome to another episode of the Black Bass Fisherman. In today's episode, we're going to be covering panfish, and that is crappie, bluegill, redear, warmouth, and also pumpkin seed. So here are take a look at some of the items we're going to be talking about today. And this is all the items we're going to be talking about today in today's video for fishing for panfish. And all these items have a place in your tackle box when you go to build a small panfish tackle box. So, the first thing we're going to be talking about is jig heads, hooks, and lines and rods. So basically, for panfish, you want to start out with an ultralight action rod or a light action rod, and you'll go as heavy as a medium light action rod. And these rods range in size from 5 foot 6 inches all the way up to 7 feet. Now the lines I use when I'm pan fishing are, I use Stren Original 4-pound test, Stren Original 4-pound test. The other line I use is Stren Clear Blue 6-pound test. And then when I'm doing my drop shotting, will be what we'll be getting into later on in the video. When I'm around wood structure and rocks and deep grass and gravel, I use Suffix Advanced Monofilament fishing line. So when I'm drop shotting deep for panfish, I use 8-pound test Suffix Advanced Monofilament fishing line. It's got superior abrasion resistance, unmatched sensitivity, low stretch, so that means you don't get a lot of memory in your line, and low memory. And as far as the jig heads, I like to use the Gamakatsu round 211 1/16 ounce. I like the Gamakatsu jig heads, and I also like the Kinetech Tungsten Super Round Jig Heads 1/16 ounce. And if you can see that, so I use 1/64 ounce to 1/8 ounce in jig heads for all my pan fishing. Now, the first rig we're going to go over is a slip bobber rig. Now, what you're going to need for a slip bobber rig is a small Thill slip bobber. All my bobbers are really small for pan fishing. That's the first thing you're going to need. You're also going to need bobber stops. As you can see, we'll take these out of the packet and rig up one. You're going to need a crappie jig, if you could see that. It's got a little ball crappie jig right there. It's got a lot of action. And you're also going to need split shots. Small to medium split shots. So let's get this rig started. So when you do a slip bobber rig, the line coming from your reel, the first thing you're going to put on is the bobber stop. Now, these bobber stops, I like them because they come with beads. And they're really small beads, and they're perfect for pan fishing. So the first thing you're going to do is take your fishing line, and you're going to use 4 to 6 pound test on a slip bobber, 4 to 6 pound line. First thing you're going to put on is your bobber stop. And it looks just like this. It's a little plastic hollow tube that's got, you know, nylon line thread around it. You put your bobber stop on first. You slide that up the line. And what you do is you take the tube off going towards the end of your line. You get the tube off, and you don't need that tube anymore. So here it is. I got the tube off, and now what you're stuck with is the bobber stop line on your line first. So what you do is you pull both ends, you tighten that down, and now this will slide freely up and down your line. You can adjust the depth you're fishing at. This is called a slip bobber rig. Next thing you're going to want to do is trim that. Trim the edges of the line hanging off. And now the next thing you're going to do is slide your plastic bead on up against your bobber stop. So we're going to get our line, find the hole, it's kind of a small hole. All right, so we got our bead on. So this is how it should look. You got your bobber stop on, then you got your bead on. Now you're going to go ahead and slide your slip bobber on, and I use Thill slip bobbers made by Thill. Slide that right through the middle, pull it out, and this is what you've got so far if you've done it right. If you could see that. You've got your bobber, slip bobber, your bead, your bobber stop, and now all you do is tie your jig head on. And when you tie your jig head on, you're going to do a loop knot. And what a loop knot basically is go through the eye of your jig head. This line is so thin it's hard to see. It's 4 pound test. You're going to pull out, I'd say about 8 inches, and you double up the line and you make a loop. And you go through the loop 2 times. 1 time, 2 times. And then you pull that loop. So basically when you pull the loop, you've got a little tag in hanging off. As you can see, there's a little loop there. So the jig is swinging freely on that loop. So you trim the tag in. And this is what your rig should look like if you've done it right. So the first thing you got at the end of your line, you got your crappie jig and your loop knot. You slide it up. You've got your slip bobber. See how that's sliding around? You've got your bead and your bobber stop. And this is your basic slip bobber rig to catch all panfish. Now, the next rig I want to talk about is basically just a straight up bobber rig. It's not a slip bobber. It's called a fixed bobber. So I want to talk about that as I put this away. And basically, a slip bobber is just something that's very simple and effective. It catches a lot of panfish, and it's real easy to tie. So I'm going to take a jig head. I'm going to use a 1/16 ounce jig head. So basically, you get a 1/16 ounce jig head. As you can see that. It's a small little jig head, 1/16 of an ounce. And I'm going to put it on a little shad bait. See that tail? See how that tail's moving and I'm not even doing anything? It goes crazy underneath the water. Chartreuse tail, silver belly, black top. So you're going to go through the center of your crappie grub. And you're going to go in about 1/8 of an inch and come out the, you're going to come out the center. Then you just put them on there. And that's how it looks when it's rigged on your crappie rig. You just put them right through the center. You come out about 1/4 inch. You know, I was a little bit off. And then what I do is I go ahead, I tie my crappie jig on. Let me get this line. It's so thin, so it's hard to get it perfectly through that eye. Alright. And like the same thing as last time, you pull out about 8 inches of line. You put both lines through your fingers, make a loop, and you go through your loop 2 times. Through the loop 2 times. Wet it. And you pull it tight. Trim the tag in. And that is your crappie jig. That's the first thing you tie on for a standard bobber rig. Just a standard bobber. Next thing you do, you go up anywhere from 12 to 18 inches. And you put your split shot on. So if you could see that, I've got the split shot on. Up from that, I got the crappie jig. And right on top of that, you just take a small float. This is a small weighted float. You press it down. You clip the hook in, the line in the hook. Then you go back to the top. And you put the top in. And that's on there. As you can see, now that's clipped on there. So you've got your fixed bobber at about 2 feet. Then down your line, you've got your small split shot, 12 to 18 inches above your crappie jig. And then you've got a loop knot to your crappie jig. And the loop knot helps it stay straight up and down. Now the next rig we're going to be talking about is the drop shot rig. Drop shotting for bluegill and crappie. And basically, it's a technique that is very popular now, and it catches a lot of fish. Catches a whole lot of fish. So, it's basically a good technique when everyone else out the water is having a hard time catching fish, and you go to the lake and no one's catching any bluegill or crappie, and you can pull out this drop shot rig and it'll work. Now for the drop shot rig, we're going to be using Mustad size 6 octopus bend hooks. These are Mustad size 6 octopus hooks. And we're using a size 6 because panfish have a small mouth, a very small mouth. So we got our drop shot hooks, and we're going to be using these little 3/16 ounce weights. These little 3/16 ounce weights. If you can see those little weights, 3/16 ounce. And you can go down to a 1/8 ounce if you really want it small. So, to tie the drop shot, all you're going to do is take one of the Mustad hooks out, or you could use your drop shot hooks for bass, but make sure you use a size 6 or 8. It's got to be really small because the panfish have small mouths, especially the bluegill. So what I do is, to tie a drop shot hook, I take the hook, I go through the eye, and then I make a loop. You make a loop. Now, when you make that loop, you bring your hook to the top. So you take the line, you go through the hook, pull the hook up about a foot and a half down the line, and make a loop. And then you put your hook at the top of that loop, and you go through the inside of that loop 7 to 8 times. So that's what we're going to do. 7 to 8 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm just going to go 7. Now once you go through that 7 times, you just hold the hook gently in your mouth, grab the line, and you pull it tight. And now you see, basically, if you could see that hook is standing straight out. See how the hook stands straight out right there? So now what you do is, you get your line, and you tie your weight on to the bottom. Make sure your drop shot hook is facing up. Take your little weight, as you can see that little weight I'm using, 3/16 or 1/8 ounce. Just tie, you can either tie an overhand knot or a clinch knot. You know, a clinch knot is strong enough. You just go around the line 4 to 5 times, and then you go through the bottom, the top of the loop underneath the eyelet of the weight, and just pull it down. and trim your tag end. So basically, this is exactly what it should look like. You've got your drop shot hook standing straight out, and underneath your drop shot hook, you've got your drop shot weight standing on the bottom. And what you're going to do with this, the drop shot rig, you're going to use a lot of live bait. And the live bait you're going to use is going to be mealworms, wax worms, and mini night crawlers. You can also use Berkley Gulp night crawlers will work as well. And what I use for the drop shot rig, I use 6-pound test. And if I'm around a lot of wood cover, I use 8-pound fluorocarbon. If I'm around a lot of wood and a lot of structure, I'll use 8-pound fluorocarbon, because it's 4-pound and 6-pound will snap very easily on the bottom with wood structure. So I use 8-pound fluorocarbon suffix, or I use Berkley Vanish 8-pound fluorocarbon. Now the last thing we're going to go over for your crappie fishing and bluegill and pan fishing is spinners. Spinners are very productive when you're going after crappies and bluegill. I like to use Panther Martin spinners, and I use the 1/8 ounce or a 1/16 ounce Panther Martin. That's a black and gold. I'll use that, and I'll also use the Panther Martin 1/8 or 1/16 ounce yellow and red with a silver blade with red dots. And then one other lure I love to use is the Blue Fox. And if you can see this thing, it looks like a little minnow, and crappies go nuts for these. So always remember to have a couple of small Panther Martins, Blue Fox, or Mep spinners, size 1/16 to 1/8 ounce. And all you do is tie those on with a regular clench knot or an improved clench knot. And if you want to, you can use a small snap swivel, and you tie your line to that, and then you can clip in and out different spinners as you change them. So once again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in with the black bass. So tune in next time with the black bass fisherman. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. So if you've liked this video, please comment and send me a message. See you next time.